I was 52 years old, standing in a kitchen that wasn't mine, when a woman I worked for grabbed my wrist and turned on the stove. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just closed my eyes and thought about my grandson waiting for me at home. But what happened in the next 60 seconds changed both of our lives forever. If you think money always wins, stay with me till the end because this story will prove you wrong. Before we go any further, if stories about quiet strength and real justice mean something to you, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications. You don't want to miss where this one goes. Now, let me tell you what really happened. My name is Odessa, and for 21 years I worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy family. I wasn't young anymore. My knees ached climbing the stairs, my hands had calluses from decades of scrubbing floors that weren't mine, and my hair had more gray in it than black. But I still showed up every single day because I had someone counting on me. My daughter passed away when my grandson Caleb was only 4 years old. Since then, it had just been the two of us. I raised him the same way I raised her, with what little I had and every bit of love I could give. The family I worked for was the Harringtons. Mr. Harrington was a businessman, always busy, always traveling, but underneath all that, he was a decent man. He remembered my name properly. He asked about Caleb by name too, not out of politeness, but because he actually remembered. Every year, without fail, a small birthday gift showed up for Caleb, signed simply, "From the Harrington family." I never asked for it. I noticed it quietly, the way I noticed everything in that house. Mrs. Harrington was a different story entirely. Everyone in that house, from the gardener to the driver to me, called her one thing behind closed doors: the mistress, not because she asked us to. Because that's exactly how she carried herself. She walked through rooms like she was doing the world a favor by breathing the same air as the rest of us. She never raised her voice at her husband. She saved that for the people who couldn't afford to lose their jobs. The Harringtons had a daughter, a sweet 10-year-old girl named Bella. Bella had her father's kindness in her eyes and none of her mother's coldness in her heart. From the time she could walk, she followed Caleb around that house like his shadow whenever I brought him along after school. They built blanket forts in the laundry room. They shared peanut butter sandwiches on the back porch steps. They were just two children who saw each other as exactly that: children, nothing more, nothing less, but Mrs. Harrington saw it differently. More than once, I heard her pull Bella aside in that sharp, quiet voice she used only for lessons she thought mattered. "He is not your friend, sweetheart. He is the help's grandson. There is a difference, and you need to learn it now." Bella would nod along, the way children do when they don't want an argument, and then 5 minutes later she'd be right back at Caleb's side, laughing over some silly joke, because that's who she really was underneath her mother's teaching. Children know something we adults forget. They know love doesn't check a person's job title before it decides who's worth caring about. I never said anything about it. What could I say? I needed that job. Every dollar of it went toward rent, toward Caleb's school shoes, toward the inhaler he needed for his asthma on the bad nights. So I kept my head down the way I always had, and I did my work. 3 weeks before the story I'm about to tell you, Mrs. Harrington had a gala to attend, one of those events where the who's who of the city gathers to be photographed in their finest. She had ordered a dress from overseas, ivory silk, hand-beaded along the collar, worth more than I made in an entire year. It hung in a garment bag in the east wing of that house like something sacred, waiting for its moment. The morning of the gala, she asked me to steam the wrinkles out before the final fitting. I had done this task 100 times before for 100 different garments, and never once had anything gone wrong. I remember thinking that morning about how tired my hands felt, how the arthritis in my fingers had been acting up worse than usual, but I pushed through it, because that's what you do when bills don't wait for your body to feel young again. The steamer worked fine for the first few minutes. Then, without warning, it sputtered, hissed, and released a burst of concentrated heat right along the hem of that ivory silk. By the time I pulled it back, a scorch mark had already bloomed across the fabric, small, no bigger than a coin, but unmistakable. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I grabbed a damp cloth immediately, dabbing at the mark, praying under my breath that it would somehow fade, that this was all a bad dream I could undo with enough scrubbing. It didn't fade. It never was going to. I heard her heels against the marble floor before I even had the chance to call for help. Mrs. Harrington stopped in the doorway of that room, and for a moment she just stared, first at the dress, then at me. "What?" she said slowly, each word dropped like a stone. "Did you do?" "It was an accident," I told her, my voice already shaking. "The steamer malfunctioned. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for." "Do you have any idea," she cut me off, "what this dress cost?" I didn't answer, because there was no answer that would have helped me in that moment. What she did next, I don't think anyone in that house expected, not even the housekeeper, who stood frozen in the hallway, watching it all unfold like she'd forgotten how to move her own feet. Mrs. Harrington grabbed my wrist, her grip far stronger than I ever imagined a woman like her could have, and she pulled me toward the kitchen. Her voice rose with every step down that hallway. You'll learn, she hissed, exactly what it feels like to destroy something that isn't yours. I want you to understand something about me in that moment. I am 52 years old. I have lived through more hardship than most people could imagine, but nothing prepares you for the fear of being physically dragged by another human being who has decided you are less than her. My mind wasn't on the dress anymore. It wasn't even fully on the fear. It was on Caleb waiting for me to pick him up from his after-school program, wondering why his grandmother hadn't shown up yet. In the kitchen, she reached over and turned the stove burner on. The blue flame hissed to life. Please, I said, my voice breaking apart completely now. My grandson needs me, please don't do this. You should have thought of that, she snapped, before you ruined everything I've worked for. The housekeeper stood in the doorway the entire time, too afraid to say a word, too afraid of losing her own paycheck to stand up for mine. I understood her fear. I had lived inside that same fear for 21 years. But understanding it didn't make the moment hurt any less. Mrs. Harrington pulled my hand toward that flame, and I did the only thing I had left. I closed my eyes. I stopped fighting. I made peace in the space of maybe 2 seconds with whatever was about to happen, because fighting back would have cost me my job, and losing my job would have cost Caleb everything. That's when the kitchen door burst open. It wasn't Mr. Harrington who came through first. It was Bella. She stood there, 10 years old, tears streaming down her face, out of breath from running through the entire house. Behind her, seconds later, came Mr. Harrington, his own breathing ragged from sprinting once his daughter told him what she'd seen. She's hurting Miss Odessa, Bella cried out, pointing straight at her mother's hand still wrapped around my wrist. She grabbed her. I saw the whole thing. I was hiding behind the door because Mama always tells me not to be near Caleb's grandmother, but I heard everything. Mr. Harrington's eyes moved from his daughter's tear-streaked face, to my trembling hand hovering just inches from that flame, to the stove still burning, and finally to his wife. Something in his expression shifted completely, like a light switching on after years of darkness. Let go of her, he said, right now. Mrs. Harrington released my wrist so fast it was like my skin had scalded her instead. Henry, it's not what it looks like, she started. She ruined my dress, I was just trying to. I heard what she said. Bella's voice cut through the kitchen, small but steady. She told Miss Odessa she'd learn what it feels like to burn. And Mama, you always tell me Caleb isn't my friend because his grandmother works for us. You've been telling me that for years. The kitchen went completely silent. You could hear the stove still hissing behind us, the only sound in a room where every adult had suddenly lost the ability to speak. Mr. Harrington looked at the dress hanging nearby, at the small scorch mark on its hem, and then at me, still cradling my own wrist like I couldn't quite believe I was safe. He walked past his wife without another word and knelt down in front of me. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice gentle in a way I had never heard from him before. I'm okay, I whispered. I'm so sorry about the dress, sir. I'll pay for the damage, I promise, whatever it takes. Don't, he said firmly. Don't you dare apologize to me right now. He stood up and turned to face his wife fully. 3 weeks ago, our driver told me you screamed at him for playing the radio too loud. 2 weeks ago, the gardener mentioned you threatened to have him fired over a bent flower bed. I told myself I was overreacting when I heard those things. I told myself you were just stressed about the gala. His voice cracked slightly. But this isn't stress. This is exactly who you are when you think no one important enough is watching. Henry, please, let's discuss this privately, she said, her composure cracking for the first time since I'd known her. Bella is 10 years old, he said, his voice rising now. She ran through this entire house because she was terrified for a woman she's known her whole life. A 10-year-old had more courage in her body today than every single adult standing in this kitchen combined, myself included. His wife opened her mouth, but nothing came out. There was nothing left to say. He turned back to me, his voice softening completely. Odessa, I am so sorry. This should have never happened in my home, not to you, not to anyone. I felt the tears finally break loose, 21 years of quiet endurance spilling out all at once. I just didn't want to lose my job, I told him. My grandson needs his medicine. I couldn't risk it, I couldn't. You're not losing anything, he said, except maybe your job as a maid. I blinked at him, confused, my mind too overwhelmed to process what he meant. He knelt down again, this time in front of his daughter. Thank you, he told her, for being braver than all of us today. Then he stood and looked at me one final time, and what he said next is something I will remember for the rest of my life. Odessa, I have watched you work in this house for over 20 years. You have never once complained. You have never once asked for more than what was fair, even when fair was far less than you deserved. Today, you stayed silent to protect this family's reputation, even while you were being hurt. That ends now. He paused. I want you to run this household. Full salary increase, complete medical coverage for you and for Caleb both. I stared at him, unable to form a single word. That's not charity, he added gently, as though he could read the disbelief written across my face. That is respect that has been long overdue. His wife tried one more time, her voice trembling with a desperation I had never heard from her before. Henry, you're overreacting over one small mistake with a dress. This was never about the dress, he said quietly. You know that. She didn't argue after that. She gathered herself, and within the hour she had packed a bag and left the house. I won't pretend I felt sorry watching her walk out that door. I felt something closer to relief, the kind that settles deep into your bones after years of holding your breath without realizing it. 3 months later, I stood in that same kitchen, not steaming a dress that wasn't mine, but teaching Bella how to bake her grandmother's biscuit recipe. Flour dusted across both our hands, laughter filling a room that had once held so much fear. Caleb sat at the table nearby, no longer hiding his friendship with Bella, no longer whispering their games behind closed doors. They were simply two children, allowed at last to be exactly what they always were to each other. Caleb's asthma treatments were fully covered now. He hadn't missed a single day of school that entire semester because of it. Mr. Harrington rarely spoke of his ex-wife after that, but he often spoke about the courage of a 10-year-old girl who ran through an entire house to save someone she loved. And about a woman who endured years of unfair treatment with more grace than anyone in that house had ever deserved from her. I still think about that day sometimes, the scorch mark on that dress, the flame inches from my skin, the sound of Bella's voice breaking through the silence at exactly the right second. Not the burn that almost happened, but the moment someone finally saw me, truly saw me, after 21 years of being looked past. Because sometimes the smallest accident can reveal the truth about someone's character. And sometimes the bravest person in the room is a child nobody expected to speak up at all. If this story touched something in you, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone who still believes kindness is worth holding on to, even after 52 years of being overlooked. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below and tell me what would you have done in my place.